All right, hello everyone. Welcome to the Couples Take On. Today we're going to talk about cycles, all kinds of cycles, sun cycle, moon cycle,
Can
hormone
we talk about my
cycles.
bicycle?
Sure.
Bicycle.
We're talking chemistry today, I guess. Today we have Anika and Dice here. We're going to talk cycles. So, brief introduction. You guys want to introduce yourselves?
Sure. I'm Anika. I am, if we're going professional, somatic movement educator and therapist, and expressive arts therapist, also a dance and movement educator, and an intergenerational educator. So I work with young children all the way through people in their 80s right now, currently. And yeah, I love having my toes dipped in a variety of fields and having a variety of clients, and it keeps me excited and keeps me curious. So that's me.
Thank you. Dice, how about you?
Yeah, hey, my name is Dice. It's actually Dice Mel. And shoot, what am I? I'm a human being, I'm a person, I'm a musician, I'm an educator as well, a coach, and really have worn many hats, many different, and I think that's part of the thing I do, bring things together from different elements. Right now, I'm getting to dip into the artistic realm again, because like we were talking about, I've been performing this musical here in Portland called Passing Strange, and that's been really awesome to get to do that and get to play music and perform, and so I'm really rocking that space right now.
Awesome. It's always a pleasure to have another couple
Mhm.
on the Couples Take On. We'd like to get your take on cycles. So before we hit record, we were just going at it. We were like, mainly me. I was like, we got to hit record.
Yeah, it was
Gotta
good
capture,
stuff.
gotta capture
Good
those
stuff.
nuggets, you know?
Yeah.
So hi,
Hi.
cycles, eh? We were talking about energy cycles before we started recording because there's a couple of us here who are feeling low in energy, although it might be rising. And I was saying to Shelly, for me, when I wake up in the morning, it is noticeable how high my energy is, and then it starts to, I would say it's pretty high through the morning, and then once I get to lunchtime and I eat and then I'm digesting, I notice I need a lot of like spaciousness, and then I'll have a little energy, then it'll dip, and then in the nighttime I get a lot more energy, a lot of
Oh,
creative
so,
energy.
so you get, okay, what time of the night do you get like more in creative energy?
Closer to say bedtime, like the later, the more creative. If I'm going to be perfectly honest, and I don't sleep these hours anymore, but I used to struggle with sleep. I was an insomniac for 10 plus years, maybe 15. And between 2 and 4 a.m. or 4 and 5 a.m., 2 and 5 a.m., we'll say that, is like when the veil is the thinnest and when some of my best work has come out of
Mm.
me. But that can be very disruptive to my cycle. So my energy cycle. So I try not to do it, but if I were to be honest, that would be probably my most creative time.
I feel that because like I generally like 10 p.m. to 2 a.m. is like really golden time for me. When I was younger or in college, till 4 a.m. was a pretty regular thing, especially if something was due soon. But try not to stay up that late. And also, we got Shelly over here that likes to wake up at 3 a.m. And if I'm not getting out of bed till 9, 10, 11, 12, that
You're
causes
like
like
ships passing in the night.
yeah. And we
Yeah.
did that for years when Shelly worked at the hospital, like just two ships passing in the night thing. But now that we're like my business partner is my boo, now it's okay, we need to like find some middle ground here, right?
That's the one thing that we've really been working on together and then separately is the energy highs and the lows. And so recently we started dialing in our supplements and then also our food because we find if we don't eat enough or pretty regularly throughout the day, we can definitely have like energy drops. And then I've also noticed recently that when I probably do for me the food every 2 to 3 hours and then making sure I'm getting the right hydration, I can stay up later at night because otherwise I tend to just like as the sun sets, I get grounded. I'm like just busy like yawning, and most of the time I'm like really wanting to do the night yoga and I can't. And I have sleep trauma also. I worked multiple shifts for a long time. And so I think the last kind of go around with the subconscious and sleep was when I was doing an 8-hour shift, which was 11 p.m. till 7:30 a.m. So I'm starting to hone in on the idea that part of the reason besides the sun setting around 7 was also when I needed to make sure I would go to sleep and be awake by 10, getting ready. And so
PM.
it's a PM. So it's some old like energetics and ideas and all of that. And then
Like I gotta hurry up and get that last 3 hours of sleep.
yeah, some weird. And it only popped up in the last probably 2 years once I had my awakening, but then also once hormones started playing a real shift in that. And so instead of for me 6 to 8 hours of sleep, it's more like 4 to 5. But it's been very interesting with all that. And then also, I know you guys are up in Oregon, the sun and how much like sun codes. And when the sun is out, like I'm out, like I can go down my list of gratitudes and affirmations and like really be in tune with all of that. But I notice when it's a little darker out, I tend to also be a bit darker.
Mm.
Yeah, I mean,
I'll speak to that
no,
one.
absolutely, absolutely. That's a really big deal for me up here. Like, especially because I've only ever really lived in places that have a lot of sun. California, before that Cuba when I was a kid. Didn't really know about the seasons until I moved up here. And
It's a harsh reality.
yeah, and it's very real. Like I didn't really notice it at first because the contrast
Yeah, it was
felt
exciting.
right to
Yeah.
have other seasons in place. But the longer I've been here, the more that's become really apparent that not having sun is like it's real difficult. If it gets darker earlier in the day, when it starts getting dark at 4:30, and that's
Yeah.
really that's
Yeah.
a difficult space. And I noticed like my energy really shifts. Or recently we're in between spring, but it's still getting cloudy. Like the days when there's sun, it's like drugs. It's you just feel it and it's amazing and it's hitting you. And I just want to go out and
We just like stare at the
spin
sun,
around and
soak it up.
get everything done. And it's like, how am I gonna do anything today? And it's funny because that can happen up here the same day. You'd be like, I'm ready to go, and then an hour later it's cloudy, and it's I gotta go inside and go to sleep. But
When
it
I
really
used to
affects me.
when I lived in Seattle,
Mm.
I used to notice like when it was like a nice sunny day, everyone was sick, calling into work. I'm like, why is everyone calling sick? They're like, oh, 'cause they're all at the Green Lake. I'm like, oh, okay. They're like, check it out on your day off or something. And I'm like, oh, okay. Check it
Don't
out. Like
call.
everyone's sunbathing and it's only 60 degrees out. And I'm like, oh my God. But I
We're
grew
the
up in
same.
Southern California, San Diego, same with Shelley.
Yeah.
And
Like,
me.
yeah, you
we're
too.
all, yeah.
You were in the LA area, right?
I was born and raised in San Diego, and then when I
Oh,
was 17, I moved to Long Beach and lived in Long Beach and worked in LA. So,
oh,
yeah,
okay.
Southern
I
California.
didn't know you were born in San Diego.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Also, you talked about Green Lake. I spent some time in Seattle, and like it's as soon as you see that sun, everybody's just
Oh, yeah. It's like the 4th of July at Ocean Beach in San Diego or something.
Yeah.
Everyone's there.
Well, I was going to say, what are some of the things that you guys do to support each other or, during when it's the dark times, during like winter and when there's not a lot of sun out? Like, what are some of the things that you've developed to really help nurture yourself during those times? And then each other, because
yeah. And how we approach it is really different because I do get affected by it. Like it's hard not to when you have the winter. It lasts a long time up here. In terms of the darkness and the rain and the general lack of being able to see the sky or sun for months at a time, possibly. It affects me less, but the way that we approach it can be different sometimes. We're like, yeah, I don't know. Do you want to answer it and then I can answer it?
I think what we do
Supplements.
in general to deal with that is stay somewhat consistent with certain
Whatever
things.
we're doing.
Like we take a walk in the morning.
Every day.
We tend to take a couple walks, and we've been fortunate enough to live by some really great parks. So, like getting out and taking a walk, even
Moving
though
our
it might not
bodies.
be whatever
Doing it
type of day
anyway.
it is, just getting
Yeah.
up and doing that and checking in with each other around like how we're feeling, because if you're in a
It can get dark.
if you're in a particularly low state, just being able to communicate that and know that we might have to sometimes fill in the gaps for the other person. And really it's just around trying to like go to bed at a consistent
Reasonable
time.
hours, yeah.
And that's changed somewhat recently, with all the performances, but like staying in the rhythm of going to bed and waking up at the
Same
same time,
time,
which
yeah.
we're pretty attuned to. Like we'll get coffee together, we'll make coffee at home, we'll go on a walk, and we just really try to do those things that get us in flow, even if they're small. I also have this, like I was showing, this sad lamp from a friend just to kind of help me get some of the vitamin D in during the winter.
We
It's like,
supplement with vitamin D because our vitamin D levels get so low. And it's once those levels drop, as it affects everything. It affects everything. I mean, there was one winter where it was crazy. I don't know how we did this, but it's pitch black until 8, 9 a.m. sometimes. And so we would do this thing it was one winter, I think we got up at 5 a.m. every day and meditated for I don't know how long, but just doing something consistently together to just go, we know that this is like painful, that transition from like deep dark sleep to like getting up and doing something. But once we're doing it, then I think that there's a component of yielding that needs to happen in the winter. And in Southern California, you can bypass it really easily. And even I think in Northern California too, where it's still much bright and consistent, but there's yielding that has to happen, which is that there are going to be days where one of us just can't or won't or doesn't want to get up, and it's the other person like, okay, how do we support that and still float down the river? So it's like sharing each other's weight in that way, or load, or if I have high energy, then I can get up and make breakfast, or vice versa. So yeah,
That's a really great point. It's like maybe like now that you're saying it, I noticed we do some of that too, right? If Shelly's a little tired, like maybe I'll take care of a little bit more. If I'm feeling a little tired, she'll take a little more. But it took time to get to that spot and like feeling and understanding each other. Because otherwise most people like just get upset about like, why can't you get up? And
Well, I was gonna say, are you or either of you affected by the moon cycles? Or because I can tell you this month of April has been I mean, we've had Mercury retrograde, we had the eclipses, and then of course the new and the full moon, and I felt all of them. And then there was one day, I don't even know what was going on, but it was like, I don't know, if yours Uranus, Jupiter, it was like some other event, and I was also really affected. So I'm curious if that is a cycle that you guys notice.
I notice it most with my sleep. I will be I would say my energy is just like curious and maybe antsy, maybe even agitated slightly, but really it's almost like a little rat in the night, just like wanting to, I've got thoughts going. I like want to go do stuff.
In the full moon? Full moon?
Yeah.
Okay.
Oh, okay.
How about you?
For me, I think the full moon, I tend to feel purging. So, like getting rid of things, it could be like releasing emotions. I'm just angry, sad. I mean, it's a variety of things. Generally, when I read what the themes are for the different moons, many of my emotions correlate with that. I wasn't sure if that's something you've noticed.
I feel it's a great question because I don't think I really notice it as much until somebody brings it to my attention, until I start looking into things and I'm like, oh, this is happening, right? Like with the eclipse or things like that. Like when I start noticing it through maybe somebody bringing it up in conversation, then I can look into, oh, I've been feeling this and this. But I think generally, I think it's something that I don't know if I really would say that I'm like very attuned to the moon cycles until some attention is happening. Although I have noticed like this last season, there's been all sorts of stuff going on. Like I've just felt this, I've been feeling this tiredness, but in a way where I feel like parts of myself have been expanding, and there's all these new things that have been like coming into play in myself. They've been expanding, and also there's been like recovery time from all this stuff that has been taking place. And because I'm in a place where I'm not avoiding parts of myself like I used to, I feel like I've had this exhaustion in a way from processing all of the stuff that I didn't for so long, that I really avoided looking at or felt didn't have the energy. That's how I've lately been feeling a lot of this, more energy wise. Tired, but in a way that feels like it's from all these processes settling in or taking place.
I can relate to that like
Mhm.
1,000%. It's new experiences, new thoughts, almost like new permissions that I've given myself. And so then it's like opening up the greater expansion, but then feeling tired for me, maybe a few days later from whatever I've done in a different way. Yeah, I completely, and so then I realize it's another cycle. It's another, like, my body actually navigating the nervous system in the way it was supposed to from the moment I was born. But instead it was like caffeine or alcohol or pills or whatever to divert. Or so you're right, when the emotions are coming up, yeah, I feel like sometimes they hit a little bit harder than in the past.
Like for me, I was pretty used to Anika was saying in Southern California, it's pretty easy to bypass the seasons because, oh, it's a sunny day, sunny, constantly in bloom,
Mhm.
right? Constantly bloom output. And then, Shelly and I took some time, we quit our jobs and we did like a sabbatical of healing for ourselves. And what I noticed is when you tap into that, then suddenly Dice was saying, you're having these things come up and you're processing these things and it takes time and that can leave you feeling a little tired because you're like releasing something. So I think of the examples with cars. Like if you want air conditioning, you have to compress the gas and then you expand the gas and it gets cool. So when you're like letting things go and expanding, you're going to cool down and then you need to like come back together and warm yourself up or get moving or whatever. So that's some of the things that I've noticed in particular with the emotional cycle of in the full moon. Sometimes I get really frustrated a few days before the full moon. And then once the full moon happens, I settle into it and then let go of whatever it was. And then I feel a little better. And I also notice that my body is doing that too. Because I notice like during the full moon, like my urine will smell a little bit different than other time of the month. And that's been interesting for me navigating cortisol and testosterone cycles. And like Annika was saying, if your vitamin D is low, it affects everything, including your hormones, in more particular, like your sex hormones, which are often very helpful in regulating like your sleep and your mood and all these things. So it's
Mm.
like, what can we do to stack the deck in our favor and still honor relaxing and resting and not overriding our system or season that we're in physically and also the season that we're in our body.
Mm.
Yeah, there's this thought of doing versus being. I feel like in Southern California, where there's this constant output, you're always doing. And with moving up here to the Pacific Northwest in the first couple of seasons of really experiencing the full cycle of, oh, yeah, in spring and summer, we create, and then in fall and winter, there's so much processing, there's so much rest. We're just being in the processing experience, the feeling experience, getting messy with all of that. And just, it's great because that hibernation process of allowing yourself to actually just be exactly as you are. So even when we talk about like the energy levels through the winter time and whatnot, like it doesn't mean that even as we're like moving through the day that the energy cycle even goes up past this point. But even if we can continue on that down low level energy, it's still functional. And it's when you resist it and when you try to do when really you're meant to be being and processing it, that's where the misalignment starts to happen. And I felt very misaligned down in Southern California for that reason. There were times I needed to rest, there were times I needed to really care for myself. And I don't feel like it's built into the culture when the weather and the seasons don't really reflect our natural need to do that.
Yes.
If you're a snowbird and you go from Michigan down to Tucson in the winter, yeah, that's cool to have extra output, but are you taking the time to go inward and go over the things you don't need in the seasons going around the sun? In the fall, the trees lose their leaves and they remind us to let go of stuff. And in the winter, an internal expansion. Shelley was talking about seasonal affective disorder because she has one of those lights too. And so it's, are you going to let yourself fully go into yourself? And then you have the spring, it's okay, what am I really gonna do? Right? I need to plan this out, need to be intentional. In the summer, it's just go. And this is interesting for men, like the cortisol production is lessened because there's more sunlight in the summer months, and then you have more testosterone. And so men typically can do more in the summer, but then we expect that same output throughout all the seasons, and we can play games with that with like energy drinks or caffeine or stimulants or even food or sugar or whatever to constantly trick our body into constantly do mode. And it's eventually, if you do forever, you're gonna have to take a break and your body will make that break for you. And so it's like just interesting to navigate all those things.
Yeah. I mean, wow, there's so much in what you're all talking about. One of the things I was thinking about as you're speaking is like, there's not just like one cycle. There's many going on at the same moment, all at once, intertwining. You can look at your solar systems and the way planets are aligned at different times. There's cycles within cycles and how they're orbiting and rotating. Like we're doing the same thing. And though there's that seasonal cycle that we're writing, like we have our own relationship to that external cycle, like in ourselves. So like we might be aligned with that or not. And that doesn't mean it's right or wrong, but like it could be a season of like winter when one person has the energetic resources to go out there because of whatever reasons. So there's so many cycles on cycles happening, your daily, your weekly, right? And there's so many things within that. So as you were talking, and one of the reasons I love talking to you guys about this is like you bring up tracking of these things in yourself, like just noticing, hey, this is what's happening before a full moon for myself. This is what's happening at this point. That's so important to track. I really can't say that I do that. Like I have periods where I get really, I'm gonna look at myself and track that data, but I don't really do it in regards to like my cycles or my moods. And like really getting that data is what's going to help you understand what's happening. So that's something that I love that you're bringing up. And also cycles for men, because I think we know as men, we're like, yeah, women have the cycle that they go through. That's like on them, and we're in the clear. At least I was programmed in that way, where it's just I don't have a context really for what like women are going through with their cycles in my body. And then nobody talks about like hormonal cycles for men, so it's not really a concept that you're thinking about. So like you bringing that up, hey, we're actually as men, we have these different energetic cycles in our bodies. That's a total mind blower, because you start looking at yourself and just there's so much more to know, so much more you can dial in, right? You can start really getting the data in yourself, then you can adjust, then you can notice, try this, try that. So
Do
a
you
lot of
guys
times,
do you guys have any wearable tech or a ring or like a
mm-mm,
smartwatch or any of that stuff?
no.
Have,
I have a little bit of tracking with like my phone when I walk and whatnot. So it'll talk about, but not like an Apple Watch where you've got your full metrics of things. And I would love to track my sleep, like how I sleep, because my sleep is so different than it used to be. But even now that I do sleep in longer or more extended periods of time, I'm still curious about, yeah, what that looks like, what that
oh
means.
yeah, so we we both did Aura rings for a while, and like the data on those is like incredible, and it's really every season they pretty much roll out new things.
Mhm.
And they got a lot of tech surrounding like women's cycles, which is for people that are looking to get pregnant or not get pregnant or check in where they're at in their cycle. They don't have a ton of stuff on perimenopause yet, but I think that's like the next big thing because we've been looking at the data that she's been getting, and you can see if like people are not getting their full sleep cycle, like NREM and REM and dream state and deep sleep and light sleep, or if you eat candy and crap before bed, like you'll literally see it in the chart. It'll literally tell on you.
Marijuana too, because it'll show not necessarily going into REM
HRV.
or HRV, but also REM.
So it's been interesting to look at that with different people. And we have a few friends that have gotten it too. And it gave me a lot of information on my sleep cycle of like when I would go to bed late and my heart rate didn't come all the way down and my heart rate variability didn't have lots of spikes. I could tell if I wasn't fully rested. And there's this book called Why We Sleep by Matthew Walker that talks about some of these cycles and stuff. Why We Sleep, Matthew Walker.
Thank you.
And then recently, I just read the book Caffeine by Michael Pollan, and he wrote the book How to Change Your Mind. I think you both have read that, yeah.
Yeah.
He was in Caffeine was talking about how people have circled around coffee for years to talk about things. And there was like a coffee shop for if you're a carpenter, a coffee shop for if you're a gardener, a coffee shop for whatever. And now we have coffee all the time, but it was for like conversation. And then in the early 1900s, industrial companies realized that when people took coffee breaks, they had more consistent output throughout the day. And so the one of the business owners was, I shouldn't have to pay you for a break. You guys are just taking break and I'm paying for the coffee. And so it ended up in court, in Supreme Court or something. And basically the findings were, as the employer, you clearly benefit from a more consistent output from all of your workers. And so you should pay that break time. And that's where we get these 15-minute paid breaks. So we caffeinate up to optimize for the work. And then 6 hours later, when the half-life of caffeine starts going away, then all of a sudden all the adenosine hits our brain. Oh, I'm tired. And then you're tired at home, and then you don't have time for your kids, your family, your partner, your business, whatever you're doing. And so in Michael Pollan's book, Caffeine, you never can get ahead on it. It's the best way to get ahead of it is to understand it and then stack the deck in your favor that way. And so that was a very interesting read before meeting with all y'all about cycles.
Mhm. Wow, yeah, that's absolutely fascinating, right? Talk about the energy cycles and spikes and the intention that we like use the caffeine for. It's something that I easily can like default to out of I need more energy. And even though you know it's not really going to provide it, there's something interesting about like going for caffeine, right?
Mhm.
And I think it's fascinating how you're talking about like the cultural component of that being that it was something that people used to gather and to have conversations and to bring into it was like a more social maybe thing. Other and only recently have we looked at it as like energy booster or juice, and that's just fascinating about the workplace level of that. But I remember growing up and in Cuba, and like coffee is just a part of the
Culture.
way that people interact, and
Mhm.
it's woven into it. And people will be drinking coffee like all day, every day, and to hang out with family. I don't know. It's a very habitual
We've,
cycle, actually.
we've had in our area, we've had a lot of coffee shops open up right by us, which is nice because we like to get out during the day when we're working from home because it's like a way to socialize. It's a way to get out there and talk to people. And I think sometimes like when your intentions are to like go out and hang out and you have caffeine later in the day, you could still go to sleep. because you're not relying on it to do your work. You're having it more of a social conscious experience, which was interesting with like we made a cannabis integration guide for when we did the 420 festival. And literally you could just cross off cannabis and write caffeine and coffee, and you could literally do the same thing. What is your intention? What's the set and setting? What are you hoping to do? What are you going to integrate in there? And what's next? And we've found clients talking in coffee shops. We've found opportunities. We've connected other people with opportunities. And that's definitely one thing I really missed about Seattle is there's always like coffee shops everywhere and everybody was always down to have a coffee. And so, but now we're starting to bring Portland and Seattle to Stockton because there's actually one more going in by our house. And so within walking distance of our house, I think there's 6.
Oh,
Well, is it
Wow.
like Trail Roasters, Starbucks,
yeah.
House of Shaw,
Mhm.
Kamal, Trail Roasters, and then there's another one moving, Poppy Coffee.
Mhm.
And then
Yeah.
there's of course other places you can get coffee, like breakfast places and stuff.
Oh yeah, there's a couple.
I think there's probably 20 or 30 places in a mile where we could get a coffee. How about you guys?
Oh, everywhere,
I mean,
absolutely
I
everywhere.
can't. It's
It's
any
coffee shops and
direction you
cannabis
walk
shops.
into.
Nice.
Those two in high numbers.
I think with things talking about like the TikTok ban and all this stuff, what it's really about is community, right? And so when you go out and you're having coffee and you're having community, you can have that on TikTok, you can have that in person.
So what I was going to circle back on, Anika, was cycles that relate to women's cycles. So their menses or moon cycles. I grew up, it was your period, it was your menses. But what it was really interesting is that as women, at least, I mean, I'm 49, so this would have been in the 80s. It was still a very shame space of having your period and whatnot. And then it was also very much making fun. So we're talking in the general spectrum of the media and then what the students were doing at school. So it was the collective consciousness at that time. But it was very much like I felt dirty when I would have my period. I felt I needed to go hide. Then it became like with the girls of whispering we were on our periods, or, oh, she's just a bitch because she's on her period, or using that as an excuse also. So not really understanding how to navigate the emotions. And then with the boys, because that's what I'll call them, very much they are clueless, like beyond clueless. So what I've realized now that I've tuned into my emotions or my hormones and all this other stuff, allowing him into that world. So that idea that like I'm letting him know when I'm ovulating, I'm letting him know when I have my menses, because in that way he knows how to support me best in different things. This weekend I was having my menses, and so I was really great on Saturday. Like in a way I was like, whoa. And then I was like, you know why? Because I had pre-thought of this earlier in the week. And then I just knew I could accomplish it and take care of it. But then yesterday, because it was like hands and knees, like scrubbing the bathroom type of stuff. Yesterday, I was like, I need to take a break today. Like, I'm like really tired. And so this was probably the first month I was so upfront with all of my emotions, because now that I'm heading into perimenopause, slowly inching towards menopause, those first 2 weeks after I menstruate, I am on fire. And that's when we have to utilize my energy. Like last week, we did a couple podcasts. I just wore a bathrobe and was like, I showed up because I was not having it. I just was like, but because we pre-planned all of this, and I'm like, fuck it, I'm just going to show up in my own authentic way. But anyway, I just wanted to get your take on your cycles, your fertility, all of that, and like how that's different than possibly how you were raised.
Yeah, very much agree around this, it almost being like a shameful thing, especially when relating to peers and with peers. I think some of it was all this anticipation around getting it. Like I was an athlete, so I got it later than my best friend got her period when she was like 9 or 10, and I didn't get mine until I was like 14, late 14s. So there was this also shame component of what's wrong with me that I don't have this, or even though I was like fully aware there's a level of like body fat you need to have. But even when I did get it, oh my gosh, like I have horror stories around how I was treated around it, or like some things that people said to me. I remember one day in high school, I was in like 9th grade or 10th grade, and a boy just like explicitly said, he just looked at me in my face and said, "Are you on your period or are you just a bitch?" And I actually was on my period, but I was like, "I'm just a bitch." Because I was like, you don't get to dictate when, but I just that level of, oh, if she's a certain way, it means. And on some level, there is truth in it. We know what we're like when we're nearing it or approaching it. And like you, it's like, after it's over, I am on fire. Those first 2 weeks, I'm feeling good. The third week, I start to break out. I feel I'm starting to get the agitation. I'm starting to notice my moods. But for a long time, and I would say just having different partners through different phases of life and having ownership of having like being able to talk about my experience with it. But I would say, as a testament to like how boys are raised, generally speaking, they are not given any amount of information about how to respond. And I will definitely say this is true for at least American boys. I know in Europe it's really different. There's like a higher consciousness level around it where it's a lot more like open and forgiving, and like partners will carry heavier loads. What you're saying, we're like, you inform Austin of your experience so that Austin can then like respond in different ways. And I think we're getting there. We are getting there, but it's something that like when you're starting from, especially as a male partner who like doesn't know necessarily anything about the cycle process, there's a lot of emotional labor that comes into this. Actually, I'm feeling terrible. And you don't know what feeling terrible feels like because this is very specific to me and my body and my cycle. But here are the ways that I experience it. So I try to be a lot more open with Dice about like my cramps. I can have really bad cramps during certain cycles, and really just owning that. If I'm in pain, I will allow myself to make sounds and groan if I need to move through it in ways that I feel like women have really tried to repress. So part of my work with my cycles is to just, it's almost like an act of rebellion. Like I free bleed a lot. And I also I make a lot of sounds with my cramps. I move, I just really let my belly hang and fall and yield and try to just, when I'm in those moments of like pain, like what can I do to allow that space? And then I just try to be open about that experience to him. And while we haven't necessarily integrated like a process around it, it's part of my work has just been being open about it, because I feel like for so long it's don't talk about it because it's gross. If you have it, it means we can't have sex, which is also untrue. But it's like this, there's so much stigma attached to it. Is it gross? Is it dirty? Is it just blood in general freaks people out?
I also feel we were taught within the school systems and then also within my family system that you shouldn't be having pain. And if you're having pain, there's something wrong with you, but not in a way that you need to seek medical. You're the problem. Figure it out. Like you just said, stuff it all down. And I feel like that sort of attitude, or I feel like that's transcended for a long time in the subconscious for men and boys. And because there are some people that truly don't believe that they've never met maybe a woman that's had tremendous amounts of pain. I can tell you in my age range that it was almost like behind the scenes, if you called in sick and you said why, it was almost like they're full of crap, suck it up, just like I do. And now it's a real thing. And there's more attention, I believe, being shed onto women's health and gynecologically. It's not just so we get a period and it's all good to go. And so then men are seeing like, no, like I have partners that are in severe pain and they might not get periods because they're so athletic. And I mean, there's so many factors, and everybody has their own individual blueprint. That's the other big thing. We are not a box when it comes to this. Like it's an individual blueprint. Just even like doing psychedelics, it's an individual blueprint.
And I think one of the things that was making me think about was like my own early experience of it. For me, I had health associations with it. So when I started to bleed, I started to notice like I was a heavy bleeder, and so that actually prompted a medical intervention to the point where I had a very low platelet count, and so that meant that I like couldn't clot, which then meant I was put on birth control at age 15. And so then there was the association of, oh, if you're on birth control, you're having sex, which really is not the same. But I was like, there was that medical intervention that was like, you need to go on the pill in order to help. So I believed for so long that was the only way that I could survive periods, was like to be on birth control. So I was on birth control from age 15 to 32, 33, 34, I don't know. And from the pill, which was not effective for me in a lot of ways, to then having an IUD. And there was a point for 7 years I did not experience a real cycle. And so when I took the IUD, or had the IUD removed, I had a moment where I literally fell in love with what my body was able to do, which was to shed the lining. And I was able, like, I remember the first time I wiped and I saw it and was like, I haven't seen this. And it felt like I was actually like reconnecting with my body. And so that's part of why I allow myself to free bleed, because I feel like when we put in our tampons and we're trying to shove it all back up, and we're trying to there's practical reasons of why we want to care for ourselves. But I think on some level, part of what I'm doing now is trying to really actively oppose the shame, the taboo, all the things I was told that was wrong with my bleeding, or why it was too much or whatnot. It has felt amazing to come full circle with, yeah, instead of that being a problem, now I actively welcome it. I see the benefits of all of it, and I roll with it. I ride with it. And that includes groaning with the pain and screaming with the pain. And it just helps me. That's like an active acknowledgement of my experience, as opposed to having an IUD where it was like, you wouldn't even know that I had a cycle.
And I forgot until you mentioned the birth control, you're right, how much the doctors, the Western medical relies on that to help to control the cycles. In fact, when I recently talked to
the symptoms?
The symptoms. When I just talked to the nurse practitioner looking into my perimenopause and the symptoms there, their treatment was to put me back on birth control, a very low dose birth control. And I thought, I'm 49. Isn't that contraindicated with blood clots and a few other things? And I just thought, no, I'll figure it out a different way. Because honestly, if I'm going to go that route, I'd want like a patch and stuff, but they're very strict. Our insurance HMO is very strict with who they authorize. And so it's playing the games. And so I'm like, let me try some other things first. And that includes like communicating to my spouse, and then working through and maximizing those 2 weeks after. And then like you were just saying, and then going with the flow with emotions and cycles and all of that.
Sometimes Shelly, with perimenopause, she doesn't know when her period is exactly coming.
Right.
But we know that like after she ovulates, there's a hormone crash.
Mhm.
And so we're trying to see that, figure it out. On the Aura Ring, you can actually share your data with your partner or partners and keep track of where they're at. There's also, I drew out some cycle thing. I know Dice loves to draw too. And so draw out some cycle things about where she's at. And so sometimes I'm like, hey, do you think you're here, or sugar cravings? Oh, do you think? It's like asking, reflecting, being a part of it. I know that when I taught for pharmacology for vocational nursing, I drew the cycles on the board. It was like the first time they'd ever seen it. And I was like, you didn't get this stuff in high school, sex ed? They're like, oh no. And everybody's getting out their pen and paper to take notes. And I was like, wait, you don't know? Seriously, you guys don't know this? No. I was like, okay, let me start from scratch. I explained for the men, the women, their hormones, where they're at. This is the range of getting pregnant. This is not on birth control. They're like, wait, I thought I could get pregnant at any time. I'm like, no. And it was just opening up this conversation. I slowed down because it was there were so many questions coming in about all this stuff, because largely it's avoided. Now, when I was a high school teacher, middle school and high school teacher, I could answer some of those questions if we were currently in the sex ed units or something, or the other teacher in the science department was in the sex ed and they were asking stuff. But it's like, why do we have to get to that point to talk about those kind of things? What Shelley's noticed, different phases of the cycle depends on like how much hydration she needs, how much carbohydrate she needs for that cycle. Where could she work out the most? There's some really cool research from Dr. Stacy Sims that is talking about how women have largely been lied to and that they should work out the heaviest when they're on their period. And the reason that they should work out the heaviest is their body is set up to eliminate. And so that's where you can get rid of all the lactic acid really quick. And so it's really cool to look at that research. Stacy Sims.
Thank you. I know you saw me writing it. It's so interesting because I've met more as I've gotten older, more business coaches who are women who will literally build their month out based on their cycle. So just like you were talking about, Shelley, where you have 2 weeks where you like have a lot of energy, so you really pack it in. And then you have your 3rd week where maybe you're doing certain type of movement, or your movement quality is changing from before maybe it was high intensity to now maybe it's more dance and yoga. And then during the bleeding phase of maybe more yoga or restorative stretching, gentle. But so that was interesting. I had that like response of when you're talking about Dr. Sims saying to exercise like intensely. So yeah.
So the other thing too is I was in a book club when we were reading that when I was I was running the tonal book club. Even there's a book called Quench, and it talks about how to get hydration into your cells. Because they said the best way for women to regulate their hormones is to have muscle so that they can hold water, right? So where's that lie of you're gonna get manly? It's a bunch of bullshit.
Yeah.
If you get your muscles strong, then there's a place for the water to go so that the reaction can happen of vitamin D3 to vitamin D and then to all your cascade of sex hormones, which is, I think there's 6 main hormones involved with having a menstrual cycle and ovulate and everything. So where's that? Now, for the women and like the women coaches and stuff, for women entering perimenopause or menopause, or they're not sure, some women have just followed the moon cycle. So like full moon should be release or your period. New moon should be like the ovulation time of setting new intentions and going out and all the stuff. And then recently, I gave an AI talk in a shadow work group. And when I came into the meeting, they were talking about their cycles. And I was like, oh, maybe what you might want to do is use AI in scheduling apps to schedule things for when you're in their luteal phase or menstrual phase so that you don't have to do it. They're like, wait, what? Yeah, stack the deck in your favor. And then also, why would you want to do all of your work output in the follicular and ovulation cycle when you could use that to do stuff for yourself too? Why are you always using that for your business? It's like kind of finding ways to navigate that too. But like, Dice, you got anything you want to jump in on?
I'm so deeply like listening and thought about all of it, and I guess where I was thinking about like I feel like all cycles have something that they're centered around or rotating around, the center of gravity. Like, once again, the planets, you have the sun, and music, have a fundamental tone. And in our bodies, we have just our sense of ourselves, or just having that awareness helps you organize the cycles. It's like when you're talking about being aware of your menstrual cycle, like being aware of these things that are happening in yourself and being informed. Now you can see the next revolution coming of the cycle. You've gained an awareness, and now it feels like there's an organizing principle around yourself. So that's where I was. Like the more you have information, you can really now, it's that rotation around the cycle. It's different. You're not just thrown in the washing machine like tumbling around. You actually you can see when things
You're like, oh, this is where I'm gonna fall.
right.
And
you can
we're washing ourselves. Okay.
But that makes so
I
much
love it.
sense when you equate it to science or magic or anything like that, because science, like, you have cells that are constantly like dying and then ones that are being born. That's a cycle. And then it was, whoa, that's, yeah.
Math, sound, music, it's all like a way to communicate, right? And like I know Dice, right before we were in this call, we were talking about like your music performances and stuff that you're working on. And it's when a crescendo is coming, like it builds up and when you're feeling it and you're like preparing for it, then it happens and everybody's wow. And then you have to have the, if things crash out, you have to like help everybody reintegrate and re-synergize, or you just, as it's falling, you synergize yourself, right? And I love how you were saying there's always something at the center of any cycle.
Yeah, and even as you say that, right? Like repetition, like doing the repetition around any cycle, whether it's like anything in your life, the repetition allows you to just know more about it, anticipate what's coming. Not because you've been around a few times, so you're not gonna experience the same thing as the first time. And I've been experiencing this, let's say in the show that I'm in, like every night a new repetition, right? Anticipating like this is when the cue is gonna be, this is where I'm gonna be. Like, okay, I've gone around the thing so many times, so now something that I might have been struggling with in the past has become something that I'm just used to. I have a solution to it. It's become like smoother. So now something else opens up that I can be more aware of next time. So like repetitions around cycles. Every time like every year we go around the life that we're living, like we're learning something new and we're integrating it and we're able to, right, if we have the awareness and the data, we can like improve on that, or we can at least be more aware the next time we go around the cycle, whatever that is. So it's just got me thinking about all sorts of things in life that we do that with, whether it's like just waking up every day and going through just the daily cycle of life, which might be going to work, going to like eat at a certain time, all of that. The more we do it with awareness, like we can really start anticipating what's going to happen, refining it, and then really shifting out of it. But the same thing can happen when we're stuck in these like cycles that aren't supporting us and aren't helping us, and we don't have awareness. Then that's the tumbling situation. We don't know what's going on, and the cycle is just perpetuating itself, and we're not able to get out of it.
It's like we're chained to the spinning thing, and we're just like we're like victim to it, as opposed to that level of anticipation, like you're talking about, with the awareness, then you can create that anticipation. I know that this is okay. I'm seeing this, so I know this is happening. Not as like I wait until I'm in my luteal phase to go, oh wow, that's here. I can anticipate in week 2 and week 3. So in anything that we're doing, but without that awareness, it's virtually impossible to do that.
It's just like the seasons remind us of that too. The month of the moon cycle reminds us of that also. And then just to go back to something being at the center. So when you were saying when you removed your IED, you first saw your blood when you wiped and you were like, wow, this is amazing. Like I'm connected to myself. Like suddenly you're at the center of your cycle. And Shelly had a very similar experience when she removed her IUD a couple years ago. Of I need this out of my sacral center. I was like, okay, we'll figure it out, no problem. And she like starts getting reconnected to her cycles because before she was at the ER, like coffee and energy drinks and downers and sleeping meds and this and that. Da, 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 da. So it's like those substances create a cycle for you, or you can tap into your own body and be reminded of your body's, I got this, it's okay, you're not going to get
the cycle you're running is a program that you've created,
right?
Just the rip and is what I call it. It's
rip
the robot.
Well, like,
it's the
run,
safety.
rip, run.
It's a safety for people. You know,
Absolutely.
Safe, just keep doing the same thing, and to change sometimes can be very difficult.
But I think it's very nice, like talking about the cycle having a center, and that center suddenly becomes you. and not like something you're taking to create a cycle outside of yourself.
That's really it brings me back to what Shelley mentioned earlier about the unique blueprint. Like when you become the center, you're operating from your unique blueprint. So if you know yourself and how you're in relation to all these things, and all of a sudden you have that ability to do something about it. Whereas if you are just writing the cycle, right? So if it's a circle and if you're outside on the peripheral, you're getting tossed around. If you bring that closer to the middle, you're able to actually have some empowerment there and actually
it's a good inertia discussion.
Yeah.
It makes me think of movement, because that's the balance point, the phase of equilibrium of if you're in a spiral, but you're like on the outside, but when you're centered in the spiral, it's like it's like the great equalizer. You can always come back and go, and your movement can be big and small, but as long as you're in that sort of center point. So just thinking about almost even like a dreidel or something that has the center of a sphere is just like, it is the great equalizer of if I'm in the center of it, I know that I can find my way back. Even if I tip and tilt, I know how to come back to the center.
That's like getting grounded, right? Or aligning your chakras, or going to the chiropractor, or whatever. It's like to be aligned and be in the center. Like when you're centered, you're in your own sovereignty and you're in your own power, deciding what you're doing, not doing it for some other reason. So it's like, I think that's all really good. As we wrap up, I think sometimes people are very curious of how do you actually do this with your partner? Like how, right? Sometimes Shelly needs a little masculine structure to hold her so she can flow through, but also part of that is her allowing that. Part of her allowing that is communicating with me where she's at, or like sometimes I know, but I don't know exactly what's going on in her body at the moment. Like that would be a communication piece. Like how Anika was sharing that too. Hey, this is awareness. This is where I'm at. Like sometimes I know, but sometimes I don't. But then also there's the flip side of Shelly holding some masculine structure for me to be in feminine flow of creativity. And so it's like there's the give and the take, and the yin and the yang, and the masculine and the feminine, whatever you want to call it. But it's like finding that synergy with partners, coming back to center, coming back to groundedness. So you can spin up in the ethereal and okay, fine. Now, how are we coming back down? So those are some things that we do to help get on the same page with cycles. Is there anything that you guys have to share about this?
Man, you know what's interesting about us? To be honest, I feel like we were very compatible with each other and have been in many ways. Like, and not to say that isn't more to learn or to integrate it, but it that really worked for us, and we were able to be very fluid with each other and build our own routines and cycles like together in our relationship. So that's been very helpful. And I think one of the things that we are working to integrate is to really be intentional with the year ahead. Like, hey, what really is it that we want to do this year, and connect with each other and speak it? And then, okay, we'll align with that as much as we're able to do. So that's something that we've just been communicating more and more as the years go by, honestly, like to just get to know each other more, because there's a lot that might be working like naturally for us that sometimes it's just by okay, we're just clicking in with each other in our even like how we move and how we like the activities that we do. But there's a lot of things that we hadn't really talked about that they were just naturally happen. So we were getting more in tune with talking, being intentional, sharing like what we need at what times, and just really being
I call it like a deeper level of intimacy that I know I never really saw talked about, or it's just something that as I've grown older, it's like the allowing the permission of that and defining for what it means, because that yet again, intimacy is a blueprint for everyone.
Sometimes I'm just like, are you hungry? And she's, yes. And I was like, oh, okay. All right. All right. Good. Thank you for telling me that.
But he can also sense if I've had sugar or carbs that crash me out really quick because I'll get quiet.
Yeah.
It's wild.
And so it's like, it's wild, but what it really is I think our bodies are learning how to energetically read each other without you're in your partner and you're in the kitchen or flowing or making music or whatever. You know what the other person needs. Like she just licked her lips, right? So I can give her this water. Actually needs to drink more water. And like,
Yeah.
how do you get Shelly to want to drink water in a loving way, right?
But yeah, there's that like fine line of not, it's sometimes we do know because we're on the outside looking in. And sometimes when you're so deeply a part of your own experience, you have blinders on. And so as a partner, you can notice the agitation or notice the whatever, the
Right.
slight edge of your partner and or of their experience. But it's like, how do you do it in a way that's cool? I'm going to be talking to you and we're like in conversation, but I hand it to him, not because, oh, you need it, but just, oh, I drank some. And so, oh, do you? It's an offering that they can then choose.
Right. Yeah.
Don't want this. Or, oh,
I
actually,
think I think a lot of that perceptivity and connectiveness can happen with any couple, really. But I think that having our deep connections with some psychedelic experiences together have really allowed us to like knock down some of the walls in programming to be more receptive of what each other is saying or doing so that we can get reconnected with ourselves and also with each other.
yeah, we have utilized it intentionally in that way as well. And even to Dice's point of what he was saying a few minutes ago about where we've like intentionally come together and pre-planned what are we recommitting to? What are we redeciding that we want for ourselves? And when we first met, like I felt like I had a very romanticized idea of relationships, which is that we
Mhm.
just needed to be compatible, that we already were, and that would made us compatible or not, that we grow toward compatibility through radical authenticity, responsibility, sharing in a level of intimacy. Like it created so much intimacy. I thought intimacy was created through or was a result of compatibility. And actually, it was like through the process of actually addressing our actual issues, did we get closer and more on the same page. It was like when we were pretending and hoping everything was going to just fix itself over the years, that didn't work for us. So it was when we shifted that, when we really started to see that we were getting to places we wanted to be as a couple. And that required some harsh reality on my end of being like, yeah, not, I used to think it's like asking for help was a sign of weakness. Now I see it as a sign of strength. It's the same way of like how I choose to show up and bear myself to him allows him to be more receptive. Whereas if I just try to show up perfectly all the time to be an ideal partner, like that's doing both of us a disservice. So that authenticity and honesty is really has been helpful. And that can be really messy and ugly sometimes.
Mhm.
But when in the times that we've been really intentional, especially with utilizing psychedelics or anything else, to just, we sat down and we went through every category of our life. And we spent about 8 hours doing it, like the day before this new year. And it was so powerful because it wasn't just, oh, we're reconnecting and trying to get on the same page. It was like, committing together to take certain steps forward and to really go in the light in the direction we wanted to with our lives and not just waiting for it to happen or not. Yeah, but that required some really like honest conversations over the years.
Like over the weekend too, Shelly had just started her period, but she wants to clean the house and get it ready for family coming into town and stuff like that. And it was like she literally said, "Hey, I want to do this. I might need you to give me a little structure." But I said, "Okay, just tell me when you want an actual break."
Mm.
So she's, "I want a break." I'm like, "Cool, for how long?" "Oh, like 10 minutes, half an hour." I'm like, "Okay, then I'll go do something else, or I will also take a break." And so sometimes I think that the moon cycle or woman's cycle, when they're taking a rest, sometimes that's a good time for me to take a rest. Or I know, oh man, it's candy time of the month for Austin. It's a little fat kid in me still loves to go have candy every once in a while. Or we'll go to a movie. I'm like, oh yeah, I get to have popcorn, I get to have cookies and whatever. And that's actually given me permission to like, I don't have to be so structured and strict and perfect. And so having a little leeway there has been really nice too. Because a lot of times, like Shelly and I have talked about this, like oftentimes men were looked to regulate the nervous system for the woman. And so now it's like finding that harmony together. And that looks different for every relationship. So my favorite question from my chat GPT. Any final thoughts that you guys have? And what kind of support are you welcoming right now? You want people to go to your show, or you want people to contact you, follow you? What do you think?
Final thoughts. Something that you said brought this up in my mind, which was like our bodies know a lot of things, and as it comes to the cycles or like the shifts in your partner or what's going on, like our bodies know, and a lot of times we just don't know through the mind, and it's like our bodies sense that. So coming into just being connected with that's something to move towards. As far as me, yeah, right now I'm really in this show Passing Strange, and I would just recommend, I mean, if you're in Portland, definitely come out to this show, and if you're not, still check it out anyway, because it's really a fantastic show. And I've got a couple things I'm working on right now, so I would just say follow me on Instagram at Fuzzy Dice, and we'll stay connected.
Fuzzy
Okay.
Dice. Contrary to much of what y'all are doing, I have a very pretty inactive Instagram or social media account. However, I would say in terms of what I'm vibing with right now is just we're in spring, we're in creation mode, like imagining, creating, starting to get the ball rolling, and stuff that Dice and I are doing together. We are planning a one-day retreat here in Portland in the end of June, with hopefully some more expansive retreats later on in the year. I will find out in a couple days if I will be presenting at a national conference that I presented at last year, but I keep really this phase of my life, my evolution is challenging myself to do the things that scare me in a way. And so there's a lot of newness this year, doing a lot of things that are uncomfortable and challenging and stimulating. And I think Dice and I we've been talking a lot about community and how to live happy, balanced lives. And that's really like the center of the work that I do, is how do we create balance? How do we create regeneration? And so we were looking at that. We spent quite a bit of time looking at that for communities and how do we do that? And a lot of it is really, for me, when I'm talking about it in movement concepts, weight sharing and weight bearing, tension and yielding, and it's what we were talking about as couples, like how does one person carry a heavier load while the other person can carry less, and how that shifts through, but looking at it on a more with a wider lens of how can we be harmonic as communities. And so we've been rolling some things out with how to talk about that and what that looks like in structure and in theory. But I think that really is driving me right now to just try to create a more just regenerative system for everyone, from the self to the other to the whole. I think that's it for me.
Nice.
And what are your final thoughts?
Oh, I have to have final thoughts?
Yeah, we all.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
They want to know. And then what are you working on?
Oh, that's where I was. Sorry, I got confused there. I just realized that we are all in this cycle of different things. And I think that when you're able to, for me, I go back in my past and think about cycles that maybe I'm seeing repeated, or emotions that might be coming up during the moon cycles, or during like my menstruate, or during my phases, because there's 4 of them. I'm seeing how they all come together. And then I'm seeing how I can utilize that superpower to help myself with the emotions, with the nervous system regulation, and like what can really fuel me up and provide the compassion, but then also just the energy. So you're talking about that. What's lighting you up? Like, where's your energy source coming from? I'm seeing how, by really evaluating different cycles within my life, because for me, cycles represent patterns, which also represent shadows. So yeah, I'm going to look at that a bit more. And then as far as some offers, I have my in-person events. We do moon circles, and then we also do a meditative ecstatic dance every 2 weeks down in person. So that's been really fun to host those for the community. And then also I do one-to-one transformational coaching, whatever it could be. It could be wanting to tap back into your higher self or your weight loss surgery tools, or just simply talking about how to live a holistic life. And then working on this, the couples take on with Austin. The goal is to be doing this once a day. We're making our way.
We're doing more.
Congratulations. That's great.
Thank you. Final thoughts. We're at the farmer's market, and one of the guys there, he does microgreens. And he was like, you guys, how long you been together? I'm like, 14 years. It seems like you guys have been together 2 years. And I was like, really? What's going on there? And what we've been talking about is like getting reconnected with your partner. Is like then suddenly we're showing up like very excited, like we're like a couple years in, like we're breaking those cycle habits that we previously were being presented with by seeing them coming, and how do we prepare and how do we let them go. And that's very much a theme what we talked about today. And then let's see, we've been working a lot with in real life brick and mortar businesses and helping them get a little bit more online, helping them expand a little bit, but still be grounded in their business and like diversifying and getting some monthly reoccurring revenue. Because, when you have a brick and mortar business for a while, like you've learned some stuff, and it's like getting that information out to people. So what we're starting is like a collective group where people come together. We're gonna have like a quarterly buy-in thing where you get to do like a podcast episode. Then I'm gonna clip it up into reels for them and make it into like carousels and some posts and some branding graphics and stuff like that. And then it also opens up to the network of people that are like-minded and also working on things, so we can bring some collaborative events together online and in person. So that's something that going to be dropping here as we enter into May. So that should be very exciting. And I'm finishing up my solar year, which May 11th is my birthday. I'll be 41. So I got like a lot of Taurus energy, sun and moon, and then I got the Cancer ascending thing and the gene keys and all that stuff. So it's been a lot of energy lately. And so Shelly's like, you need to chill out. That's a good thing too, right?
Right.
All right. Thank you again.
Yes, thank you.
I'll hit pause and then we can.
Fun.
Yeah, it was fun.
Yeah,
We've been meaning to do this particular episode for a while, and it is really good to do it with another couple, especially a couple that is also business partner and booze, not drinking booze, but booze.
I have like a couple like ideas for the podcast that we can talk about offline together,
Okay.
because I think it'd be good to get other couples, because I don't think we're alone in this.
So
Absolutely.
someone recently was like, man, like, how do you get reconnected with your partner? And how do I reconnect myself so I can attract that ideal partner? And we're like, okay, basically we need to distill down what we've been doing to help others do the same. And likely it's very similar to what you guys have been doing. Like, and everybody resonates with different people. Like they catch the vibe, and like they may like our vibe, they may like your vibe. It doesn't really matter if like they go to you and not us, because it's about a collective thing. About if people vibe with you guys, they should go with you guys. If people vibe with us, they should go with us. Or if they vibe with someone else, it's fine. But it's like how I think people genuinely want that, and people want to know how to do that. And a lot of it is like Dice was saying, like there's some sort of center point. So it's like becoming yourself, stepping into yourself. Anika and Shelly were saying getting connected with themselves. Then suddenly, then when you're connected with yourself, you can advocate for yourself. And then also find that push-pull dance with your partner and the universe, right?
You can do that with yourself and with your partner. People sense that, they feel that, and they want to know what's happening. If they're not, because it can be alien when you're not having that with your partner.
Yeah, and it's like, where do you start? It's the change begins with you, right? So it's just taking a look at yourself and honoring and appreciating yourself, and then figuring out where to go. Okay, you guys want to talk offline now?
Yeah. Thank you for having us.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.